Welcome to the Turn on the Music podcast. My name is Kyle. I'm joined here with CJ. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Doing all right. It's been a little tiring few days,
Sure
but
has.
it's it's good. It's good to be here behind the mic and speaking with you and getting back to talking about the book.
Yes, yes.
How are you doing, Mister Multiple microphones, computers, and all that other jazz?
My brain is spinning. Um, so for those that are not watching this on the YouTubes, we are going to start doing these on the YouTubes as well. So if you want to see us do the podcast, you can
I'm
go
sorry.
to our first. Yeah, sorry. You can go to our YouTube channel and you can um, browse our YouTube videos, and we will. So starting this past Monday, actually, it's a week ago Monday now. We uploaded the first episode of the podcast on YouTube. There was no video; it's just a static image. The first three episodes will be like that, but this is the first episode with video, and it was a little bit of a nightmare to set up. I've got two microphones in front of me. I've got two computers running, one for video, one for audio, and yeah.
That's just because you like to make things difficult for yourself.
No, because I'm cheap. I don't feel like buying another computer. I just bought a new computer. I don't want to buy another one.
That's what I said. It's because you like to make things difficult for yourself.
I
Difficult.
suppose. I suppose. So, episode three, sorry, no, episode four. Oh boy, is technique for the music lesson. But before we get there, um, what are you listening to today?
um, Actually, excuse me. I've been listening to Victor Wooten a lot.
Nice.
I actually started with his. It's funny how when you go into the different streaming apps, because we use Spotify when we do certain things,
Mm-hmm.
but I have Apple Music, so I
Right.
tend to sit in there, and it's interesting how they show the majority of his albums, but so his first one, which was
A
can't think
show
of
of
the title,
hands.
Show of Hands, and then it was What Did He Say,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that was
Yin Yang.
Yin Yang. Now Yin Yang is easily found on Spotify. So when you go to Apple Music and you type in Victor Wooten and you bring him up and you go to his albums, you don't see that right away. At least on the mobile app. I had actually searched for the actual album name in order to bring the album up. It's just very weird how all that is not
Right.
there. Like his album should have been just there.
Yep.
So I've been trying to listen to them in almost an order
Okay.
of when they came out, just to see because we talked a little bit about his progression and his music
Yep.
when we were live on Twitch, and you definitely can hear it even in the first three albums. You can
Mm.
hear the difference. So
Yep.
that's what I've been doing.
Even the
And
first two albums, you can hear the difference.
oh yeah, huge difference. And then today, which I text you, I said, "What do you listen to when you need to kind of like zone out a little bit, even if you're at work?" And you recommended Rachmaninoff's Vesper, which
Mm-hmm.
I did not realize at first that it was going to be a choir. And
Oh,
typically, I don't listen to choirs.
yeah.
And it was good. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of my favorite
actually,
tunes. Well,
yeah,
pieces.
I haven't had a chance to listen to the whole thing, so I'm gonna actually probably go back to it tomorrow and finish it up.
Yeah, it's 45-ish minutes of a cappella Russian choral music. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Right,
So,
right. It actually was. I wanted as soon as the first movement came out, I was like, wow, this is really pretty.
mhm.
Yeah, so I appreciate the recommendation. How about yourself? What do
Yeah.
you listen to?
Same stuff. Punch
Yeah,
Brothers, Nickel Creek. So,
it's like you sit in that pocket for a while.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do the same thing with like we sit in that pocket of music for a while, and then like you get to a point where you almost start repeating it over and over and over
hmm
again, and it doesn't get boring though. It's weird.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. And I'm really interested in trying to do some of the tunes on the Punch Brothers album. I'm thinking about trying to figure out how I can pull it off. I think it'd be fun to try. Like,
On one instrument, piano.
I don't know. That's what I think. The piano. I think we like the record, the Edmund Fitzgerald that starts that like bass like eerie thing. Like, could I pull it off on the piano? Like, how would I make that work? Um, so
You
I
could. There's so many layers you could do.
right, right, and I
And
thought,
like I have a soprano sax. I can make things sound eerie.
yeah, and but my first thought was, if you've watched the Piano Guys video, they do like the Angels We Have Heard on High, I think it is,
Yeah, yeah.
and where they take the bow, they take the tip of the bow off, and they like actually like
Yep.
do this little like thing. So those are on YouTube. You can see this little hand motion, but they actually like bow a string on the piano. I thought that might be kind of cool to try and do that, but I don't know how to do it yet. So I have to get the piano tuned first, and then buy a
And then
bow
you got to
and
get a bow and cut it
rosin, and
up. Well,
so
can't you just buy the strings?
a
The horsehair?
horsehair.
Can't you just buy the hair or whatever
I
the
don't
hair
know
is?
if I can. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I can find it online, sure, but I think it might be easier to rosin it with a bow because you can put tension on it, then rosin it up, and then let it go, and then
I see what you're saying.
use the bow to kind of keep it.
They do have a bow.
They
I
do,
think
yeah.
it's attached to the bow.
It is attached to the bow, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is attached to the bow. Interesting.
So I'm thinking about maybe talking to Rachel, see if she has an old bow that she's got laying around that she doesn't want anymore. Just to,
Can I
yeah.
destroy this bow? Are you okay with me
Right.
destroying your
I
bow?
need one of your $2,000 bows. I'm gonna just smack the tip off of it.
Just gonna tape my hacksaw to it and see what happens.
Yeah. So, that's what's kind of floating through my head is how do I make that stuff work? My two favorite tunes are the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald and Orphan Annie. So
The record that Edmund Fitzgerald is a great tune.
yeah,
And it's so weird to listen to it after watching a paranormal show
right,
go through
right.
that. Like that makes it even eerier.
Mm-hmm.
And for what they went through in that
Yeah.
episode. So that's a good song.
Mm-hmm. It sure is. All right. So, shall we get to the book?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a question before we go into the
Sure.
chapter, but it's related to the
Mm-hmm.
chapter.
Yeah.
So I've been listening to it on audiobook as well because that's sometimes the easiest way for me to get it into my head. But then I go
Mm-hmm.
back and I read through the chapter and I highlight the things that kind of stuck out to me. So when it said technique, I'm like, what am I really going to pull out of this chapter? Like, is
Mm-hmm.
there anything really that's going to come out? Because when I listen to it, I'm like, okay, they're talking about technique, right? And then I listen to it a second time because like, let me put it back in my head. And I'm like, oh, I missed that, and I missed that. And then I read it, and I'm like, oh, I missed that, and I missed that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is a pretty long chapter.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to it, I was like, wow, I circled a lot more than I anticipated in this. Did you feel that way with this chapter?
Yeah, I did. I mean, the problem is this book is it's probably easier to tell you what I didn't highlight in this book, because there's just so much, and like on the Kindle, when you do it on the Kindle, like it shows you like the spots that other people have highlighted and how many people have highlighted it.
Right, right.
It's like I've highlighted a lot more than those people,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So, so what you're saying is the technique of listening to the audiobook is not as good as the technique of reading the book in terms of gathering information and
I'm gonna say yes and no to that for the
okay.
simple reason that I'm driving when I'm listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some of my focus is on the fact that I am driving a vehicle that I don't want to swerve off the side of the road.
Right.
But yes, I think that there are missed elements when you're listening because when you're listening, you can kind of zone out,
Right.
right? And
And
it's
what's
not
funny,
music.
go ahead.
It's not music that you're zoning out to, because when you zone out to music, you can kind of like listen to different parts to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a book, so there's not much going on. Now, with this chapter, there's actually a lot of music in the background
Yeah.
as they're talking, and then it kind of cuts out. So it was very interesting how this chapter was done. But yes, it's a little bit different when you're reading it because you do catch certain phrases and stuff.
Right. And what's interesting for me, the second book, I read it first and went, I don't know what I would highlight in this book. And then I listened to it and I went, I was wrong. There's a lot I got to highlight. I've got to go back and do it. So,
It's the inflection of his reading too.
right, right.
Because he's reading his own words, so
Mm-hmm.
he really puts emotion into the words.
Right.
And I'm sure as we go through this chapter that'll come across.
Mm-hmm.
So Please begin.
as I try to maneuver the book around the microphones. Um,
Just cover your face on the camera. No
okay,
one's
how
gonna
about?
complain.
But see, the problem is when I do that, it's too dark to read. So it's like, can I go like this and still? I don't know. I have to figure this out. You go first while I try to figure this out.
So, as we said, this is measure four. The name of the chapter is measure four. Um, and there's usually like these little lines that are taken out of the chapter, and the line that's taken out right at the beginning is says, "Are you using magic?" And the response is, "Yes, I am." It's called technique.
Hmm.
So I actually highlighted the first paragraph in this chapter,
Hmm.
and the reason why is it does continue on from the previous chapter, where the previous chapter ends in such a way where it's kind of like boom, here we go, like they're gonna move forward.
Right.
So the first paragraph reads,
Before
"I
you
was
go on,
speechless."
because I was listening to the podcast this week, and we didn't touch upon what I thought was a really interesting thing, and the fact that we both missed it in terms of reading it. I thought so. The whole chapter is about articulation and duration. What we didn't talk about is how they related the tracking and the footsteps of the animals to notes.
True.
And because I think it's really interesting. So I've said and we've agreed that that music is a language, and I've said that I could go over to the piano, which is not set up tonight, so there's no way I'm going to do this tonight. But I can go over and play a chord and say, "You sing the next note," and I can influence you to sing the next note.
Right.
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 So with the notes or the tracks on the in the grass, you can see where the tracks are leading and where like it's where so it's almost like the notes pushing you somewhere. So by the you can tell the direction of the animal, if
Right.
they're
Right. Right.
turning, if they're and you can
Right.
tell the speed that they're running by judged by the depth and how the foot hits the ground. So it's really interesting if you think about it that way, how that relates for me to music, like how that how I see the notes on the page or like hear a phrase, I can tell where it's going and where it's been, and play around with that and influence people to do things. So I just wanted to bring that up before we moved
No,
on.
and that's a good thing to state because it's really funny because at work I I I've learned people's steps.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone's behind me, I know who they are
Yep.
because I've learned the sound of their gait when they're
Mm-hmm.
walking. Because everybody at work walks pretty much at the same speed at all times, except unless they're rushing to go somewhere, and that's on a
Right.
very. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying they don't rush because it's just the nature of the business. You're not rushing unless it's
Yep.
something really critical happens. So I've many of times my friend coworker would be walking behind me and I'd be like hello and they're like how do you know it's me? I'm like I'm listening to your steps, the gait
Mm-hmm.
of your steps,
Yep.
so I know that it's you.
Mm-hmm.
So after a few steps I know that you're the one that's behind me because we all have a different
Yep.
step.
Yep. The lady at the
It's like
front desk does that too. She can hear me coming as I'm walking. Hi, Kyle. So
so it's very true that's funny that we didn't mention that because
yeah.
there's a whole big thing about that.
Yep.
Very, yeah, that's definitely good bringing it up. Sometimes you bring up smart things.
Yeah. Not often though.
Well, so
All right. Go
here
ahead.
we go.
Continue. I'm sorry. I cut you off.
No, no, not at all. So the first paragraph of measure four reads, and this is Victor reading. I was speechless. I stood there for a moment, letting his words linger in my mind. A breeze blew across my face as he turned and walked away. It chilled my skin. Somehow I felt his words were connected to the breeze. I can't explain it, but it was as if his message was carried through the air and into my ears by the wind, and like the wind, it hit before I could see it coming. I It's such a poetic paragraph.
Right.
And it's so true sometimes that you're just sitting there and like the wind just hits you and you're just like
Mm-hmm.
there's like more to it than just wind hitting your face.
Right.
And for you, your bald head.
Yes. And it's funny. I was driving down the road. So we hit 80 today. So I had the top down the Jeep, and I was driving, and all of a sudden, like the wind, like punched me in the head. I was like, whoa, it was, um, so the wind was not as gentle as the breeze was to Mr. Wooten over here. So,
So that, I just thought that stood out because of the fact that there's a lot of conversation in the book, and
Hmm.
that was there was just something that kind of like caught him off guard. So
Yeah.
that was in the first kind of change. I don't know if there's anything on that page that still stands out to you, but
No, no, I actually don't have much until page 78. So,
okay. So I actually have a thing on 77 that
okay,
stood out, and then look, two things. So he goes in. It's the idea of Michael created a fire
right.
by rubbing sticks together, and Victor goes, "How did you do that? Are you using magic?" And he goes, "Yes, I am. It's called technique.
Hmm.
Without proper technique, nothing can happen." And it's very interesting because I thought about that for a second. Because if you think of a magician,
Hmm.
it's a sleight of hand technique half the
Right.
time,
Hmm.
right? You know, I guess there's this whole belief that there is some magical form to it, and depending upon what you believe in, there may be something. But in most cases, there is a sleight of hand or a technique that they're using in order to create this illusion
Right.
that plays a trick on your mind. So I
Hmm.
thought that was very interesting that he connected this magic and technique. And then at the bottom, this stood out to me because I think this is something that I've always kind of struggled with when it even came to playing like piano. Michael says, use both hands equally. Most musicians favor their stronger hand. They may never realize it, but if the problem is not corrected, it will surely hinder their progress. And here, as he points to the sticks, if the problem is not corrected, you'll never make a fire.
Yep.
And it's so
Yep.
true because you can learn something wrong.
Mm.
And that's
Yep.
something that I think we forget is possible,
Yep.
especially when we're teaching. And I'm
Hmm.
saying this in all aspects.
Yep.
You could say one thing wrong, and that one thing may stand out, and that may be the one thing that keeps the person from learning the next thing.
Right.
Or they just harp on it or they sit on it, and because
Hmm.
they learned it that way, they don't realize they're learning it wrong. So I thought that was a very interesting say. And it's not that he said that you made a mistake or you screwed up and you're never going to fix it. It's just that that's what you work on. You work on that
Hmm.
mistake versus realizing you got to fix it.
Exactly. Yep.
I will. That brings us to 78. So I'm curious of what you got on there.
So, I feel like it's like I'm an old person trying to like read with new glasses. It's like, how do I
Well,
angle
I
the
mean,
book? And
it's pretty accurate for you.
yeah, it is. Yeah, I can barely see anyway. So, it's towards the bottom of the page. It says, "Eventually, you will even forget about your bass. Only then can you remember how to play music. Think about talking. When you talk, the words are your notes. Your tongue, diaphragm, mouth, teeth, lips, and so on are your instruments. How you use them to push air across your vocal cords and through your lips to form words is your technique, but you rarely think about that." There's just so one of the things that I've struggled with is technique. And I remember when I was in college, my first piano professor harped on my technique, but she never explained to me why my technique was wrong. She just
I know
told
who
me it
you're
was
talking about.
wrong. I didn't know how to fix it.
And
You know,
there was no way given to you to fix it.
right, right.
Right. Yes.
It was
Like,
just
and
wrong, 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 and it was frustrating. And I lacked that showing. You know, um, and my technique on the piano has grown tremendously. I have big hands and very heavy hands. So I prefer pianos that have very heavy action
sure.
because, it's just,
Right. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just the way I play. Um so not having that background in technique really bothered me. And it was my second teacher at Post that first started teaching me about technique, and then that grew, and then I realized that I was starting to focus too much on technique, and the technique was consuming me, and I was not being musical anymore. And I think that's what this is all about. It's technique is really important, but when you get to a point where it overshadows everything else, in the beginning of the book, they talk about all these, elements being equal, and focusing too much on one of them pulls back from the others. And technique, and they'll talk about in a little while how to make technique become second nature. That's what I've started to focus on. Learn the technique, and then how do I do it without thinking? Because that's
Right.
what we do when we talk, or we walk. I mean, they bring that up in the chapter too. It's when you're walking, you're not thinking about all the muscle movements that go into actually walking.
And it's like any language.
Right.
ASL being my wife's family's main language, just watching them sign sometimes, you're just like, it's crazy because it's so second nature to them.
Hmm.
It's so there's no thinking about the process. They just
Right.
sign. And there's the language. So I'm going to bring you up a few lines, a
Yeah.
few sentences, and I think it goes to what you're saying. Good technique allows you to use all the other elements of music at will.
Hmm.
So it's not that you're getting rid of it. It's just that you need to take your focus off of it in order to be good at it.
Right.
Which I know they explain more, and I'm sure we're going to talk
Hmm.
about that more as we move on. And that's the thing I feel on the saxophone. Like my techniques are not horrible, but I know I could be better,
Hmm.
and I know I could have a better technique, which would make me a better player when it comes to, let's say, jazz music.
Right. And there
Like I
there
could play
are
classical music well,
right.
but I can't do jazz very well.
Right. There are a few techniques in that list that I guess impact or relate to others. Technique is one of them. There's a technique to playing notes. There's a technique to tone. There's a technique to articulation. There's a
Oh, you
technique
mean
to
the element
phrasing.
list?
Yeah, the element list. So
Okay,
each
okay, okay.
each one of those has its own
Yeah.
technique, and
Yes.
there are, I think, the few elements that relate to all of them. One of them is technique, the other is listening, and the other is phrasing. As far as that goes, like the other ones, they really kind of stand by themselves. I think.
Right.
Notes are notes, rhythm is rhythm. But there is a technique to learning how to play rhythm. There is technique to producing notes. There's a technique to the tone of the notes. Um, so I think technique is interesting because it does relate to all of the different elements, not
And
just its
and I
own self.
right, and I still think it comes down to learning how to do something and then making it your own.
Right.
And they do will I'm sure they'll talk about it, but even in previously in the book, like he says, you know, it goes to the point where you're gonna learn how to do. It's like doing something over and over and over again. But I'm skipping steps. Is that okay? He goes, it's
Hmm.
okay if you skip steps.
Right.
I don't know. Is that in this one
It
actually?
is
Is
in
that
this
in this?
chapter.
I think I'm a little ahead of myself. No, I'm a little
Yeah,
ahead of
I think
myself.
it's in this one. I read 2 chapters this week, so it could be in the next chapter, but I'm pretty sure it's
No,
in
no,
this
it's
one.
good. Do you have more within these 2 pages, 78 and 79?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of overflows into the next page, but
Yeah.
towards the bottom and once on 79, it says, when learning music, we think we need to concentrate really hard on something until we achieve success. We also think we should lock ourselves in what we call the woodshed for at least a few hours each day and focus on what we are doing. We practice our scales or modes techniques over and over until they become second nature. This we think is the only way of attaining the level of master musician. I propose a different path. And then he says, when we are playing music at our best, are you concentrating? Do you want to have to concentrate every time you do anything well? No, you don't.
And it's funny because you passed the part that I was wondering if you were going to say it or not. Above that paragraph that you just read, when
Hmm.
learning music, he talks about when you learn about speaking and your
Right,
parents didn't lock you in the room to make you work 3 hours a day on how to speak.
right.
It says you learn to speak through natural process. And he
Hmm.
says musicians could benefit from looking at this process.
Yep.
It in a sense of, as a musician, you are looking at this way of, okay, I got to sit here, I got to learn my scales, as he says in the next paragraph. But what if you don't look at it that way?
Hmm.
What if you change that idea and that thought?
Right.
I mean, look at Charlie Parker. He learned by going up to the side of a building, listening to a person play,
Hmm.
and then trying to work it out himself.
Right.
Like, he didn't have a technique.
Hmm.
Now, I understand a saxophone, there's a pretty straightforward technique, but they're still blowing into the reed.
Hmm.
They're still making the sound work. They're still
Yep.
making sure you're in tune. There's still a bunch
Hmm.
of things that play a factor.
Yep.
And he did this by ear. There's a lot of musicians that do things like that by ear.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
And,
yeah.
and one of the things that Victor is big on, and I think Michael is too, obviously, is that we don't teach music as a language. When you have a kid come in for their first lesson, like, what's the first thing you do? Like, you show them notes, but like, when do they like play? They don't really.
And I'm curious,
Mm-hmm.
and I know this can be a longer conversation, so it's more of a touch, and maybe we can tap into it a little bit more at a later time. But sitting in a lesson, I've fallen into that path where it's like, okay, we're going to learn these notes. This is
Mm-hmm.
part of that is learning how to read the notes.
Right.
But I feel like sometimes, and I feel like I could go back in time and sit in that situation again and say, blow into the horn.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about what's on the page at the moment.
Yep.
Just sit down, hold this note.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care which one, just pick one and go.
Yeah.
Like instead of them saying that's a G on the note, that's a B, and that's a D. So play GBD. No, no,
Mm-hmm.
no. I wish I could have gone back and go, just blow.
Mm-hmm.
Get a sound out of the horn. Let's go
Yep.
from there.
Yep.
You know, play around with it.
Yep.
Get a feel for it.
And what's
Yeah.
funny is I've been watching, I mentioned this a while back, but I've been watching some trumpet videos, and how people are starting to teach trumpet now, and I kind of did this when I was teaching my brass instruments, but so on a brass instrument there are multiple notes that you can play without any fingers, right? So for instance, the trumpet, the first three notes that you can play on a trumpet with no fingers are C, G, and C. Um,
Okay.
on a French horn, it's
Right.
different. It's C, E, G, B flat, C, D, and then a whole bunch of others. But you know, and the typically what happens is when the kid starts playing on the trumpet, they start playing on a G. Well,
Right.
the first note that every single book talks about is the C below it. So
Interesting.
it's really weird. So like, because every kid that I taught started on the G, but everyone wants you to play a C, so you can play in the key of C. So you don't have to worry about key signatures and stuff like that. Works better when you're in band. But what they're starting to learn now is that um, part of the problem with the trumpet is people when they see high notes they freak out. Well, really, that G that they start on, that's the middle of your trumpet range. But what's
Right.
happening is they're teaching C, and that becomes the middle, even though it's the bottom end of the horn. So they get so used to playing so down low that they don't think about how to play higher.
Their amateur
So
doesn't adjust.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's interesting. That's
yeah.
very interesting. Like
So
the natural
mm-hmm,
initial blow of the horn is a
yep,
G.
mm-hmm,
And that's because then to get down to that C you have to loosen your lips a certain way.
yeah, mm-hmm,
Which then that's interesting.
mm-hmm,
Because there's a little bit of a muscle in there.
yes,
There's that's right. That's interesting.
yep,
See, we pull away from the natural and we
mm-hmm,
force the unnatural.
right.
And then that forcing that unnatural
Because
takes
everything is focused around notes,
right.
you know. But
Right,
then
right, right.
again, I mean, if you think about it in terms of the way a band works, you really kind of want everyone to play in the key of C because kids freak out over black notes. But is that how we're teaching? How many times do you start a student in the key of C sharp with seven sharps? You don't.
You don't.
But why not? We make it harder on them.
Right, because you give them the fear of the note.
Right.
Right. You give them the fear of the note. Right. Because you look at a sharp and you're like, oh,
Right.
there's four of them there.
I got to remember this to the whole measure.
I know, right? Yeah, it's one of those
Or if
things.
it's in the keys, I had to remember this the whole song. Come on, man.
As an adult, I still feel that way, but
Yeah.
still. I gotta remember to start the car and put it in I gotta remember to take my keys out before I lock it. So, not that I've done that recently.
Yep.
Last
So
week.
later on, he says, concentrating or focusing is great for projecting your thoughts or your will. This usually means closing down the mind in a way that shuts out all other factors except for one thing, the thing that you're attempting to achieve. And that goes back to what I was talking about. When I was focusing on my technique, I shut my brain out to focus on my technique. I didn't think about music. I didn't think about anything. It was just how am I playing? And my brain being the way my brain is, stupid. It's yelling at me that my technique is still bad, even though I'm thinking about it. So it was so counterproductive, and that's why I don't think I made much progress at all.
And it's funny because you're talking instrumentally
Mm-hmm.
as a vocalist, and I say that. I mean, I went to school for this. There's a technique involved in singing and properly hitting the notes. And as a singer, a lot of people don't think, oh, you're just a singer. It's not always natural. It's not always something that happens. And I'm not saying that there aren't natural singers out there, but there's still a technique to breathing. There's still a technique of doing certain things that allow you to be able to sustain a note, to
Hmm.
hit a note, to get down low, to get up high, or whatever the case would be. And it's funny, you wouldn't think about practicing and focusing on technique while you're a singer, but you are. And
Hmm.
there have been plenty of times that I focus so much on where I need to place my voice in order to do this and do that. I mean, I kind of ran into that when we were trying to do something at your house when I was there in Ohio. Like I was focused on the wrong thing
Hmm.
in order for me to properly do what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And when I kind of turned that off, I was like, oh, well, there we go. You know,
Yep.
you know, and even now, like if I'm in the car and I listening to something, I decide to sing into it. If I don't think about the fact that I'm singing to it, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't feel like I'm straining. It doesn't anything. But if
Hmm.
I take the time to actually think about it and focus on it,
Yep.
that's when I start making those mistakes and whatever you want to call them. That and you're just like, oh, I can't do this.
Yep.
Like, yeah, it's that's so yeah poignant to life. On that same page, I don't know if you have more on that same page, but
I do.
is it continuous from that point?
A little bit further down.
Okay, go ahead, because it might be the same thing I'm talking about.
I have when it is time to receive information, opening the mind works best. It is like taking the power of your mind and opening it up to whatever information is out there. The mind cannot achieve its true potential until you have mastered each of these techniques. Like yin and yang, which we've brought up many times, they work together to complete the whole. If you do not want to have to concentrate every time you play your bass, every time you play your bass, you should not have to concentrate every time you practice.
I did the same time every time I read that chapter. It's such a weird break in the sentence,
It is.
and and that's exactly the next thing that I
Mm-hmm.
was going to get into. Um, and that still goes to your point that you closed your mind to everything else while you were practicing your technique.
Mm-hmm.
And because you closed your mind to everything else, you probably didn't practice the way you needed to practice for your technique.
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and there's so much more that they get into with the brain. So I don't even know what to say because
Mm-hmm.
it's just gonna start talking more about stuff. Do you have more after that you feel, or do you have anything you want to add to what you just read?
Um, it's they get into it later on. I think where is that?
I have something at the bottom of 82 that I kind of
Yeah, go for
underline.
it. Yep.
So at the bottom, it's the last paragraph on this page. So he talks. He goes, like smoke, like this smoke. Knowledge is there. So mind you, at this moment in the scene, he created a fire, and there's smoke coming out of wherever he created this fire. Like this smoke, knowledge is in the air. All the knowledge that ever existed or ever will exist is already there, right here, right now. If you can tune into the correct frequency, you can pick up any information you want. We think the brain creates knowledge, and this is what I think is very interesting. We think the brain creates knowledge, but I'm here to tell you that the brain creates nothing. The brain receives, or more accurately, it discovers. And then he continues to say, and towards the end of this paragraph, he goes, the brain can receive information and then use it, but create it, no. And it's very interesting because I looked at this as an artist who likes to
Mm-hmm.
draw and paint. And you're like, well, I'm creating. But I'm creating based upon things that I already know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like I'm sitting here going, oh, I'm going to, like, it's coming from something I know already.
Right.
I'm going to start with a tree. I know what a tree is. Like, I didn't invent the tree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's one of those, and it's funny because I read that. Oh, I kind of read that a couple times. It's like it's so true.
Yeah, and I think a little
It's
bit later on he talks about Michelangelo and how he sculpts. You know, they always say, he didn't make this; he just removed the excess away from what was already there.
right, and that was something I knew that a quote was from Michelangelo. He talks about how the statue was already in the marble that he
Mm-hmm.
used. He just removed right the excess marble, and
Right.
And that's such a great way to see things.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great way to think. It's true. We don't know anything,
Right.
and what we are learning is just based off of what we're seeing in front of us. And what
Mm-hmm.
we create is just being created from something that's already been there.
Right.
You know? Someone didn't invent the wheel. What happened was they probably saw something roll
Mm-hmm.
and like, we could use this.
Well, they probably ooga ooga ooga.
All right. You know, like we could probably modify this and make
Mm-hmm.
this work into our favor.
Right.
You know, like it's just stuff like that. Or, you know, it's just, I mean, you could theorize the beginnings of anything,
Yeah.
but just the thought of what he says, something had to happen to provoke the thought of we're
Mm-hmm.
going to make something roll,
Right. Right.
and we're going to smooth it out to the point where it works.
And it's funny, like it makes me think of a Lewis Black skit, and he was talking years ago, um, when the year 2000 hit. It was probably a couple years after that, but he went, "There are no flying cars. Why are there no flying cars? Because we wanted a credit card sized device that we could not talk to people on, just send people messages. That's what we wanted. We wanted a phone that could send messages to people. But if we focused on flying cars, we'd have flying cars.
It's true.
You know?
It's true.
Yep.
That's very interesting. That's actually really fun. It's too fun, and it's true because no one talks on the phone as much as they used to anymore.
Right.
You know,
I
or
and
it's the video
I
chat
can't
that's
remember
fun.
I can't remember the last time I called someone and I was excited when they answered the phone. It's like, oh, I wish I got the voicemail, you know?
I mean, I do make phone calls lately, and I'm excited that they pick up the phone. But that is true. There's times when someone's calling because you have call ID. Like, no,
Yep.
no, don't need to talk to this person right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll call
Yep.
him back.
Yep.
I'll text him.
And there are times where people call me and go, why are you not texting me? It's so much faster, you know? But, you know.
Well, it's true. It's the instant connection.
Right.
Yeah. On that same page 83, I don't know if you have anything that you highlighted as stood out to you.
Music comes. Sorry. I'm trying to...
No, it's fine.
Music comes out of a radio, but is music inside the box? No. Music is in the air. The radio has the ability to tune into the proper frequency and to pick up whatever music it wants, but it does not create it. Imagine if the radio could open up and play all music at once. The result would be chaos. Unless it's tuned in to what we want to receive, it's not really working at all. Many people lose control in life by doing exactly that. They open up to the all without the proper control necessary to assimilate the information. The result, unless prepared, is chaos. Remember, all knowledge is in the air, and since you breathe in this air, all knowledge is also in you. The radio demonstrates what I am talking about perfectly.
I hated reading that paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So before we get to the hate part,
no,
here's the
not in that like.
yeah, but here's the interesting part. We talked about before how technique is about focusing on one thing, right? Now we're talking about opening up to everything. It's the yin yang again.
Right, but now he's talking about the fact that well, yeah, because you're not learning how to control it,
Right,
which is what he's talking about.
right.
And I think for people with anxiety
Mm-hmm.
and people with overthinking, which I'm one of them, you know,
Me?
and you are. Do you
Absolutely.
No, I know you are. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, I'm agreeing that I'm one of them, and I know
Yep.
we've spoken about this multiple times. When I read this, I was like, oh man, it's so true because
Mm-hmm.
so much happening in your head, and you don't learn to focus on the one thing to clear it out in a sense.
Right.
You know, you're dealing with everything that's going through your head, and instead of you focusing on the one moment and saying, okay, this is okay, I can remove this from my thought, you're like, well, this is happening, okay, then this is going to happen. Well, this is happening, this is happening here, and this is going here, and this is going here, and well, this is going on over here. But while this is happening, this is happening, that, and you're just like, you can't. And I think I had a conversation with a friend. It brings it together, like it's almost like a tornado that just brings everything all together to the center of your thought.
Right.
Things that don't even need to be there. They just come to the center of your thought and make
Mm-hmm.
things difficult for you to process.
Yep.
And then you start thinking of other things. You're like, oh my goodness, what's happening here? No, what's happening here? What's it, and that's what he's talking about. And you're right, without the proper technique to control your thoughts, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I
Right.
miss meditation, because when you put your focus on your breathing, it almost allows you to create a database of your thoughts and separate them.
Yep.
That's the way I would describe it.
Yep. For sure.
So that was one of those It's not that I hate the paragraph. No, I do. I hate the fact that it's so true.
I know.
So
There's a lot of stuff in this book that I hate because it's true.
right. Uh, and he just continues to kind of like marvel at what Michael's saying,
Mm-hmm.
and how he talks a lot about his own mental health.
Yeah.
And we know it's a repetitive thing that I've said, but even here he talks about how he tries to block out other information, or the fact that his head is so full he can't cram any more in.
Mm-hmm.
He'd have to literally push stuff out.
Yep.
Um,
And I feel like that too. I've been talking to people at work, and they're like, "Oh, you like cars? You know how to fix them?" No, I have a mechanic for that. Like, I don't want to
right,
learn how to fix that. Like, I know about computers. That's what I do. I do audio, I do computers, I do photography, do technology. That's what I do. If I start
right.
learning about other things, stuff's gonna fall out, and I gotta like put it back in, and then the other stuff's gonna fall out. Like, no, I'm done. I have people to do that for me.
Right. I see. On me, on the other hand, I try to absorb as much as possible.
I mean, I do too. I
No,
mean,
no,
you know
no.
me.
But
I mean, it's
but
just.
like I need to learn when to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Like no, I don't need to do this. This is what I have this person for. Where I'm like,
Right.
well, I know I have this person for it, but why can't I learn how to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then if I can't do it because I don't have the tools, it's a different story. But if I
Right.
can do it, I'm going to do it.
Well, it's like your desk. Like, you know how to build a desk, but it's like it's a lot easier to buy one. You know.
Right. And
So you
I
do the
wouldn't
same
have
thing
had
that
the
I
time
did.
to build a desk. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't have the time to build a desk. So I was like, I want
Mm-hmm.
to buy one. It wasn't expensive.
Yeah.
And it was less than I expected to spend. And it was
Mm-hmm.
working out great. But
Yeah.
I look at it going, I could have easily made a desk,
Yeah.
but it would have taken me a lot longer. Even though I bought this desk and it did sit for a month before I put it together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another story.
Right. It's like your smoker. You bought it and it sat for a while, and you
Oh,
eventually
now I
started using
use
it.
it all the time. Now I gotta actually clean it.
I
I
do
gotta
too.
talk.
Mine is so dirty. I got to clean it. Oh.
Yeah. Because I want to clean it soon. So as the weather gets warmer,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to maintain.
Yep.
I think I'm gonna, with my OCD, I want to go out and buy a small wet dry vac specifically for cleaning out my barbecue, and that would be the only thing I use it for. But that's just because I have a weird OCD.
You sure do.
Um, like making multiple accounts on my computer for specific things. Moving on.
Moving on.
In there, he moves on. He talks about his thoughts and stuff like that, and then Michael asks him, "How does everything that they talked about pertain to technique,
Mm-hmm.
like the openness, the focus, and all that stuff?" And Victor goes on and says a lot, and I don't want to read everything that he says, but one of the things that stood out to me, and you could read more if you feel you need to read more, but one of the things that stood out to me in his description was, my mistakes are often caused by frustration, and making mistakes often causes me to become frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, in life and in music,
Yep.
you make a mistake and you get frustrated on that mistake and you focus on that thing, and there goes your nervousness, there goes your anxiety, there goes your overthinking,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then and because you're frustrated, that's what I just I was like, that line stood out.
Yep.
You know,
And it reminds me
I
of one of the things I used to do with my kids. So, I taught a lot of kids, and you get to a point where a kid becomes completely saturated,
mm-hmm,
in a lesson. Sometimes you just blow their mind so much that they just can't absorb any more information, and
right,
the stuff that they could do before they walk in the door, they just can't do anymore. And it's like, it's weird when you're like, I taught for a store for a long time, and it's like I would sometimes get the kid to that point at like 8, 10 minutes into the lesson. Like, I
excuse
can't
me,
just let the kid go, and like the parents gonna get yelled. Where's the lesson
yeah,
my next 20 minutes? So
right.
one of the things that I would love to do is, you know, when they got to that point, I'd take the music and I'd flip it upside down and go, "All right, play it," and they'd be like, "What?"
I
And they
just
would
Victor
sit there and
Borged you.
they'd sit there and try and play it, and then I flip it back over and go, "All right, now play it again," and then they were fine because it was just taking their mind away from the frustration just for a second, to do something stupid. I mean, and I would do other stupid things, but that was one of my favorite
You
things to
wait,
do is
you do stupid things?
every single day. Absolutely.
But you make a very good point. It's like sitting at the computer all day long
Hmm.
and not stepping away from it.
Right.
And you and I both work in jobs where we need to sit at the computer pretty much all day long.
Hmm.
So there are times where I break my day up where I have to be in at 8, and by 10 o'clock, if I have not stepped up and moved away from my desk, I force myself to step up and move from away from my desk.
Hmm.
I finish the task that I'm on, even if it, whatever, but I make sure that I stand up and walk away, even if it's just down the little walk path to the next
Hmm.
person and say, "How you doing?" and walk
Yep.
back down.
Right.
Like, there's a small office, so I know everybody in the office. But it's just one of those things where you need to step away.
Hmm.
And that's very, it's a good point. You just needed to kind of shut their brain off for a second and
Yep.
then restart it.
Yep.
It's a good point. A good way of looking at it. I don't know what else you have. I don't want to
My next is
jump
an
over.
86.
I'm sorry.
86 is my next.
Okay. So, yeah, I know. I agree with you. The stuff that I have highlighted here is more on the personal end. That's just something that stood
Hmm.
out. Nothing that I feel, it's just some of the words that he uses to kind of refocus himself in a sense.
Hmm.
Like, he kept feeling the energy, so he kept talking.
Right.
Like he didn't want to stop the thought process.
Hmm.
Though he does go into something about if not concentrating is where I want to end up. I need it to add it to my practice. So he needs to teach himself not to concentrate in order to concentrate.
Exactly.
Back to the yin and yang.
Yep.
So both parts of concentrating and not concentrating are necessary to complete that circle. And it's so true because you don't really think about it because when you're performing, you want to focus on the music.
Hmm.
The interpretation or the impression that you're giving to the audience because they don't care how you're playing it. They
Right.
don't.
Yep.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it
And
needs to
then he
become. I mean,
talks
Michael says it needs to become second nature.
right, and then he talks about using the TV as a distraction, and it's really funny. I used to do that all the time when it came to working on papers and writing papers.
Hmm.
The TV was the distraction. It
Right.
allowed me to kind of split my thought process.
Hmm.
And I would work and I would watch a little bit, and I work and watch a little bit, and I would get my work done.
Yeah.
But I needed the TV or something to hear and look at.
Yep.
So it's very interesting that he brought that up.
Yep.
So you said you're on 86. What do you have on 86?
Actually,
That
that's exactly what I have.
uh,
So we talk about the TV. Anyway, if we're gonna watch it, why not use it to our advantage? That's not the only way. Daydreaming, night dreaming, sitting in nature, meditation, and other things can help me learn how to not concentrate, so that we can spend more time focusing on the music. If we had to concentrate all the time on the techniques and the instruments we use to talk, we would never be able to say anything worthwhile. Being able to concentrate or not is necessary before one can reach its full potential. If television can help me with that, that's what I'll use. You may choose to use something else if you want to. And this is something that I've done because my brain, we've talked about my brain and how negative it is, and one of the things it's very bizarre, and I don't know why this is, but there are certain instruments that have a block, and trumpet is one of them. Even though I can play the trumpet, um, one of the things that is in my mind every single time I play the trumpet, you're gonna get tired. Your lips are gonna give out on you, and there are sometimes where it's instant. I'll put the trumpet on my lips and go, "Wow, I'm tired already." Like, so what I would do is I would use the television as a way to distract my brain, and I would just sit there and play scales, play arpeggios, just and not focus on what I'm playing or that I'm playing, but watch TV. So that way, I was building the muscle strength and my endurance in my lips without my brain getting in the way, saying, "You're tired. You got to stop." And
so
I
you
found that, like,
believe so you believe and you agree that that's a mind over matter situation
absolutely, yep. Because there are
where
times where, like, I would be able to play for like 10, 15 minutes, and then if I put on like a binge a show of like MythBusters, I remember watching MythBusters while doing this. I went through like 4 hours. I played nonstop 4 hours. Had no idea, but
Right.
the day before, I struggled to get 10 minutes out of the one without getting tired, you
Right.
know?
And it's because your mind was focused on something else
Yep.
as you were just doing
Hmm.
something that should be second nature to you.
Yep.
Right. Makes sense.
Because
Absolutely.
on the French horn, similar mouthpiece. I could play French horn all day long. Never get tired. Doesn't bother me. Trumpet,
Right.
I don't know what's different about it. I've even taken my French horn mouthpiece, put it on the trumpet. So everything should be essentially the same, with the exception of a little bit of back pressure on the instruments. Other than that, it should be the same. But I still get tired on that damn trumpet.
So you
I don't know
so
why.
you got your mind so set up on the fact that trumpet tires you out that no matter
Yeah.
when you pick it up, your brain is
Hmm.
already like shutting you down.
Yep.
That's
And it's
interesting.
like
But
guitar
it's
is the same way. It's like I
true
picked up
thing.
that guitar and it's like it doesn't feel comfortable, and I don't know how to make it feel comfortable. And it's
Right.
like, I mean, being a musician that's played for 30 or 40 years, like it should come natural to me, and that bothers me that it doesn't, because other instruments have done that. But the technique, I just something about it, I can't
Yeah,
grasp it.
we have our brick walls.
Yeah.
Like for
And
me,
I haven't found a way around the guitar yet.
yeah, I haven't found my way around the piano yet. I
Yeah.
wish I could play. I mean, I understand it. I know the concept. I understand chords. I know
Hmm.
how to read the notes. I know how to do
Hmm.
that stuff. But for some reason, like for me to learn a piece that probably should take me a few hours to kind of get under and then really master after a week or two,
Hmm.
it'll take me a month or two. Like I can't. It just there's something that stops me from doing it. And I
Hmm.
and I've tried everything and I don't know if it's just there's more to my mental block than just that, but that's what it comes to. It's
Right.
it's very
Right.
interesting.
And
Um,
what's weird, and this is what bothers me, is, you know, I want to be able to teach myself. Because I know that if I had a kid that was going through that same problem, I could figure it out. But I can't
right,
separate myself from myself to figure out what's wrong.
right.
And that bothers me.
Yeah, no, I get that. I totally get that. So, what is? Wait, did I miss that?
I don't know. Did you?
I don't know.
Your
Do
reading
I not?
technique, your reading technique comprehension is bad.
No, no. I
Maybe you were
totally read
watching
that.
TV while you were reading. I don't know.
I was. No, actually, I don't think I was. No, no, no. I totally read that. Um, I don't know why, but I have a little bit of a. Oh no, I know what it is. Okay, it's just the way I wrote my notes. I'm a little confused by how I wrote my notes. So I don't have anything until jumping into 88. So I don't know if you have anything that
Nope.
goes
Go
in.
ahead, go for it.
So in 88, towards the bottom, he states, "This is Victor is talking about techniques. No, I'm sorry. Michael's talking about techniques and how people are making flashy techniques and this and that, and they focus on the flashy techniques and they don't focus on the music and this.
Hmm.
Many musicians get caught up, way too caught up, in the technique when it could benefit them to get caught up in the music. And that just goes back to what you were saying, where you were so hyper focused on the technique
Hmm.
that you lost the ability to play the music in a sense as
Yep.
music versus you know. And I just that just stood out because it's true. We said it already, a few minutes ago that we focus on the wrong things sometimes,
Hmm.
which makes the things difficult to process.
Yep.
And then I jump into 89
Yep.
and this like I just these are like little one-liners that kind of stood out. The more we feel music, the faster the technique falls into place.
Hmm.
Now, with your experience, do you feel like that's the case?
Absolutely. I remember when I was in high school. We've talked about my choir director last episode. He said, the louder you sing, the longer your notes need to be.
Right,
And he would always say that we need to focus on the details and not, the big note picture. Focus on the details of the music.
right,
Don't focus on your breathing, because that'll come. But, focus on the meaning behind the piece. That'll change your tone, you know. And if you start listening harder, or I mean, I always like what Dr. McRoy would say. Listen louder. I love that when he said that. But and that was
It's true.
essentially what people what my choir director was saying was that focusing more on listening to other people and not you to make you a better musician. So focusing on the little details to get the bigger picture.
And it's funny, one of the things about breathing that I learned when it came to singing,
Mm-hmm.
breathe for the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we go to talk, or speak, we take enough breath in to complete the second sentence that we're saying.
Right.
Then we breathe again and we just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not thinking about the fact of the words we're going to say. Our body seems to know how much breath to take in order to say what we're going to say.
Right.
There's the
Right.
involuntary breath to say what you want to say and you move forward. So when you look at a phrase and you're talking and going down to basic grammar and everything, you read the commas and the periods. The comma is like your breath. The
Mm-hmm.
period is the end of the sentence. So if you're breathing based upon those punctuations, you don't need more breath than that.
Right.
And I was like, that's ridiculous. You can't do that. You can't tell me that that's true. And then you start doing it, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well,
Yeah. And
that is true.
you know, when I was working with Ron, one of the exercises that we would do, and it's such a great exercise. He'd say, "All right, take a deep breath. Now exhale. Now sing." Just to prove to you how little air you need to actually sustain a note.
Right.
You know.
Right. And then you're also taught that you need more air for higher notes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need more air to do that. And it's not that it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
it's that there's a lot of contradiction in music when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to learning technique.
Yep.
Like, don't do this because you don't need to do this, but you need to do this to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's finding that balance of being able to say, okay, yes, I only need this amount of breath to say the next thing or to
Mm-hmm.
sing the next thing.
Right. And here's another interesting, just getting back to what we're talking about the little details. And I don't know, I was just thinking about this. This might not be um, the reason, but every piece that I sang in high school, I can still sing from memory. 3 years of choral music, I can do every single piece from memory still.
So, like, if on the spot right now I said sing it, you could do it, or you're
Yep.
saying that if you're in the group, you could sing it.
I can do it right now for you.
Okay. I have a different childhood than you, so I think part of the reason why I can't remember certain things is because of the
Mm-hmm.
childhood I had. But
Right.
uh,
But
but
my
I get
thought
what you're
was like,
saying. 'Cause
is it because we focus so much on the details that it just stuck with me because it was
it could be
more
your
ingrained?
teacher.
Right.
It could be your teacher.
Yep.
A
Like
hundred
I
percent.
I know what we did in college. I couldn't sing that stuff again.
And it's not that we sounded bad. It's not that we didn't have
No.
a great time. It was just the way. No, and I agree with you. And I mean, that's kind of what I was going to bring it back to. Is like, I know I had a fantastic time in chorus during high school.
Mm-hmm.
I know we had a great teacher. I know that we sounded good. We
Yep.
were one of the best choral groups
Mm-hmm.
around. But her technique was different than your high school teacher's technique, and
Yep.
because of that, you have a different experience that has you
Mm-hmm.
keeping that memory. And that doesn't mean that they're wrong. They just had two different routes of getting what they wanted out of the
Yep.
choir.
Maybe my sleep apnea started after high school. That's what affected my brain. Who knows? I don't know.
That's possible. That doesn't explain me though, because there's stuff that I remember, stuff I shouldn't remember.
Yeah,
Like
but
it
you're an
just
idiot.
yeah, well, that's a different story. Um, that the bottom of that page where I read that last line,
Mm-hmm.
um, one thing I think stood out, and this is a line that I think I would probably write down somewhere they can see it. You're being trapped by your mind.
Mm.
We do. We get
Oh
trapped
yeah.
by our mind
Yep.
all the time.
Absolutely.
All the time. And everybody has their own thing, and everybody deals with their own thing, and everybody in some way, shape, or form gets trapped by their own mind.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't let it bother them. Some people do.
Yep.
And I think in some way, shape, or form, we need to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think for those that let themselves get trapped in their mind and they don't know how to get out, need to figure out how to get out to balance that out. And those that just kind of let it go need to realize that they are trapped in it and not just have to let it go. Because there's that balance. It brings it back
Mm-hmm.
to that balance of yin and yang. Like you
Right.
need a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm. I'm
That's
gonna back
my
you up
thought,
just
my opinion. That's not a medical. It's my thought opinion.
I'm gonna back you up a
Kind
little bit. Um if your goal is to speak music right now, concentrating on a technique for years may be viewed as a mistake, a waste of valuable time and effort. And that's one that I've struggled with, because, not just about music, making music, but just doing things in general. Trying to find, we've talked about Charlotte before on the show,
Yes.
and Charlotte is very focused on finance,
Right.
and she loves it, and I try to embrace it, but I find that for me, there's so much that I want to do that finance gets in the way.
You mean in the sense of your brain not wanting to accept all the information when it comes to finance, or the
No,
actual like, I want to spend the money?
I want to spend the money. You know, like I want to do something because I'm not going to be here forever on this earth. I want to do stuff, but at the same time, I don't want to pay a mortgage for 30 years. I don't want to do all that sort of stuff. I want to pay that off, but it's like, do I want to have an experience or do I want to pay off the mortgage? Do I want to wait? That's my conundrum, especially now. It's like, I sit here and think about it, like, if I didn't have a mortgage, like if I had focused, like if I had done a 15-year mortgage for my first house, I'd be in a much better financial situation right now. But what about all the stuff that I did while saving money on that payment to do other things?
Well, but that's the thing, is you have to balance out what's
Right.
more important, your experience
Mm-hmm.
or that financial. And
Right.
it's okay to be focused on finance. Like, that's her thing, and that's
Mm-hmm.
awesome, and that's a
Yeah.
passion of her, and that's fantastic.
Yep.
And that's great that that's a passion of hers,
Mm-hmm.
but it may not be a passion of yours.
Right.
Your
But I know it's
passion
important
lies
at the same
alone.
time. It's like,
Huh?
I know it's important at the same time. You
Right, but
know.
there's your it so there's your important
Mm-hmm.
versus her important.
Right.
Her point is not hers is not different than yours, and yours is not. It's just that's what it is. It's like I talk about
Exactly.
health with people, like me being 100% healthy and you being 100% healthy is a different 100%,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have type 2 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could be 100% healthy for me, I'm still going to have type 2 diabetes.
Right.
The only difference is I'm maintaining it better.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And my 100% is not going to be my wife's 100% or my
Mm-hmm.
son's 100%. Like, it's just me needing to be 100% so I can maintain my lifestyle and not let that take over it.
Right.
So it's the same thing with that. Like, if finance is important for you to save to do this, but if you're saving, and I know this is menial compared to what they say you should save. If you're saving $50 a paycheck
Mm-hmm.
compared to the next person that's saving $1,000 a paycheck, it's working for you and it's working for them.
That's true. That's true.
And I think that's what happens, is that we get so hyper focused. We get to that point where we're like, well, I should be doing this, but I should be doing this, and I should be doing this. But
Mm-hmm.
no, you should be doing what sits best for you.
Right.
And that's what we try to teach as teachers or as
Mm-hmm.
musicians to young musicians, is that we're you'll get there, but
Mm-hmm.
let's have some fun first.
Right.
Like, don't don't go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So, but
Yep.
I get it. I get what you're saying. You also get to a point in your life, you're like, I want to retire.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I want to retire tomorrow.
5 years ago. Anyway.
um, where were we? Got some.
Yeah,
What
there's
are
a
they?
lot
What
of good
is? I
stuff.
forget what show is. That's some good conversation. That's some good conversation. Um, I read the Being Trapped in Your Mind.
Mm-hmm.
I have something underlined on page 91,
Go
but
for
I
it.
don't know if you have anything else.
Nope. Go for it.
Um, so this is, let me just make sure I'm in this right spot. So this is Michael speaking to directly to Victor. Now, what do you think would happen if you could convince yourself first at the beginning of your quest? In other words, before you start practicing anything, convince yourself you can already do it. What would happen then? I'll tell you. Depending on how well you do at the convincing part, you will cut your practice time in half. Use the full potential of your mind, and practice will become a thing of the past. So, this comes to the point where the reason why Michael's talking about this, just to give a little context to this, is that Victor's looking to better his practicing skills, or better his practicing, or become better faster.
Hmm.
And Michael's saying that we need to believe in ourselves to convince ourselves that we already know how to do this,
Right.
in a sense. And I thought that was important because that a lot of this relies to everything relates to everything that's going on, not just practice. It's like
Hmm.
in life, if they say that being happy is a mindset,
Yeah.
and it's a struggle for people to be happy because they each have their own traumas that they're dealing with.
Hmm.
And nobody's trauma is worse or the other than their trauma is their trauma. It is what it is. You're
Yep.
not, mine's not worse than yours. Yours is not worse than mine. It's there. It creates a blockage in
Hmm.
your mental state, in your physical state, so you can't move forward.
Yep.
So they say being happy is a state of mind,
Hmm.
but the struggle for most people is getting to that state of mind to be happy.
Hmm. Right.
So you need to convince yourself that you can be happy.
Hmm.
So those few times that you sit back and be like, I'm happy, I'm good, are those few times. So it's like if you practice that every day, almost like an affirmation,
Hmm.
at some point your brain is going to go, yeah, no, I am happy, I can do this.
Right.
And that's that very interesting thing, because I do try to go into my practice sometimes when I'm thinking of the piece that I'm going to sing, and I'm like, no, I can do this, I got this. No, I can
Hmm.
I can hit that note, I can do that, I got that, I understand that, that makes all sense. Like, kind of think about it in that sense. So that was very interesting. I don't know if you took anything, like what you took out of that, or
Yeah.
if that stood out to you at all.
So there are a couple things, and getting back to what you were talking about is going back to my high school choir director. One of the things that he themed my second year that I was there, the theme of the year was choose joy. Like, you could choose to be miserable all you want, or you could choose to be happy. Why wouldn't you do that?
Sure.
You know? And he was very much the kind of person that would wallow in pity and surround himself with negativity. And he tried that entire year to find joy, in every situation.
And it's hard to do,
Hmm.
especially in this day and age
Yep.
when there's so much negativity going on
Hmm.
around, and
Yep.
it's hard to find even the positivity. It goes back to what the quote from uh Mr. Rogers, where he says that his mom said, "Always look for the people doing good in the situation."
Yep.
That's a paraphrase of the quote. I know the
Hmm.
exact quote, but that's essentially what it is,
Always
and
look
it's
for the
true.
helpers.
I'm sorry.
Always look for the
Look for
helpers.
the help, right? And it's true.
Hmm.
And I try my best to be the helper,
Hmm.
and to be that support, and to be that lean on for other people. And
Right.
sometimes you forget to do it yourself
Hmm.
for yourself, and that creates that other aspect to it.
Right.
But it's true. It's a mindset, and we're all learning,
Yep.
and we're all learning differently because we're all coming from different situations.
Hmm. And then getting back
And
to what you were talking about, learning to be happy.
mhm.
That's a lot about what the way I meditate. A lot of what my meditation is about is it's recognizing when my brain is out of control and then realizing it and realizing how to not realizing it and then redirecting it. And it's almost like if you take a piece of metal and you bend it, like the first time you bend it, it's really hard. And if you bend it again on that same seam, it becomes easier. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. So that's like the whole point behind meditation. And I've taught meditation in a way people are like, well, every time I meditate, my brain does something else. I went, that's perfect. Meditation is one of those things that you get better at it by being bad at it. If your
Right,
if your goal is to have your brain not focus on something else, just focus on that one thing, you're doing it wrong. You want
right.
your brain to do something else so you can practice redirecting it and recognizing when it's out of control.
So you want to fold that piece of metal and then fold it again so that next fold is harder. Fold it down again so that next
No,
fold
no,
is
no, no,
harder.
no, 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 no. You want to fold it in the same place. Keep folding it so that fold becomes weak.
So you're saying that I'm asking I'm legit saying, so you're saying that each time you meditate, if something new comes into your brain,
Hmm.
you want that fold to be able to
So
take that.
here's my piece of metal, right? I take it and I fold it.
He's
This
using a
first
visual
fold,
for those that are not watching
yeah,
a video.
this is what you got to watch on YouTube, right? So I fold it in half. That first fold was hard because it was my first fold, right? So
Sure.
now I open it up. I'm going to fold it on that same plane. Now that fold was a lot easier. The more I do it, the easier this becomes
Right. And so
because you're
you're saying that
weakening this.
so you're saying that when other people say they go to meditate, something else comes into your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of folding it constantly, that fold makes it easier for them to learn how to deal with each
Essentially,
individual new
yes.
thing that comes to your brain
Yep.
versus
Yep.
keep
Yep.
on folding. I should
Yeah.
have paraphrased.
This,
I should have
yeah,
phrased it
this
better.
initial fold
Yes,
is the hard part. But the more you
that's what I meant.
recognize
Not
when your
yeah,
brain is out of control, that
yeah,
fold then becomes easier and easier and
right,
easier. And it's easier
right.
to recognize, easier to redirect. That's
I
how
just
I teach meditation.
I just used the wrong words.
So,
I was with you.
whatever.
Just used the wrong words.
Guess I could have used my book. I've opened and closed the book a lot of times, so it's easy to open and close.
It flies away. It flies away.
Pretty soon, pages are going to start flying away because I've opened the book so much.
I am. If we're moving forward from this,
Yeah, move forward. Let's go.
I'm on page number 92.
92,
92.
92. Let's
And
all
he's
drink a cold yoo-hoo. I've lost my mind.
I mean,
Yeah,
he does
sorry.
he says on the page, he goes, "Truth. What is truth? Truth is up to you. You make your truth. No one else does." All right, that's an interesting sentence. But the further you go down, he goes, "You cannot half-heartedly tell yourself that you can do something and then expect to be able to do it. You must be honest. From all levels of your being, you must know that you are talking about what you're talking about. If you want to practice anything, practice knowing that you can do whatever you set your complete mind to. Don't practice believing, practice knowing." Which goes to what we were just talking about, is that whole thought of, I can say to myself, I'm going to wake up happy tomorrow.
Right.
But if I don't really, really feel that way, or if it's not knowing that I'm going to wake up, if I can wake up happy tomorrow versus I'm going to and I believe I'm going to,
Mm-hmm.
two different mindsets.
Yep, absolutely.
And this is very interesting because this is where you start seeing a side of Victor that is agitation
Mm-hmm.
in this book,
Yep.
because he starts getting upset because Michael's not being direct with his answers.
Mm-hmm.
And you get why Michael's not being direct with his answers, because he wants Victor to figure out the answer himself. He doesn't want to just cut to the chase. He doesn't just want to tell him. He wants him to figure out, because I agree. If you can help guide somebody to the answer versus telling them the answer, they're going to be better for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So he talks about that, and like, you tell that Victor starts getting upset, and I mean, even at some point, he says, "Stop jerking me around."
Yep.
Like, you just stop doing this.
Yep.
Losing his cool and hitting the hood of his car. And I love that he puts this in here, and I love the fact that he humbles himself in this way,
Mm-hmm.
and he shows the fact that, I may be calm and cool when you see me, but this does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do get, I can get to this point.
Yep.
And then he does like a weird Yoda thing. The need to practice when you are ready. You will lose, not before and not after.
Yep.
Anyway, that was his Michael's little Yoda thing. But and that keeps going, like that whole back and forth with the aggravation and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps going, and then I get to the page of bottom of 94 with some more stuff.
Start by knowing you can already do the technique. Believing it won't do. You must know it with all your being. Using concentration to focus and project your thoughts is very valuable, as well as learning to use not concentrating. This will open your mind to all that is available to you. You must know how and when to use both of these tools to achieve the greatest accomplishments. You understand that now, don't you?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
No, and Victor doesn't.
Yeah. Yep.
And it goes on. It goes on. You know, he goes on to say, Michael goes, if I have a musical passage that I want to play but don't yet possess the required technique, I will focus on the technique just long enough to understand the exact moments required to do it in the most efficient way, which I believe goes to a form of meditation that you were talking about.
Hmm.
And even to the point of using affirmations to get yourself to put yourself in a different mindset.
And
And
a
then
lot
I'll
of a
point,
lot of that last point in the most efficient way, that sums up Victor's technique on the bass. It's all about
yes,
conservation of motion. His double thumb technique. He realized that when you slap a bass, you normally slap it and come off of it. He realized that by coming off it, he could actually hit the note again. So
yeah,
just by going like this, he's actually playing two notes. And
right.
then he adds two fingers. Now you can hit it once, hit it again, then pluck it. Now you've got a triplet. You can do it four times now, and now
Right, right.
so
It's
he can play
efficiency.
this. This can be four times as fast just by moving his hand this
And what
much.
he means by this, he means just tapping the
Watch
thumb
YouTube.
on the
Watch
string.
YouTube.
You got to watch YouTube, but him tapping the thumb on the string and then
Yeah,
utilize it. But yeah, take a look at YouTube if you want to see the visual aspect of that explanation.
I'm glad
um,
we did this one as a video because there's a lot
no,
of
that's perfect. That's good.
visual cues.
Yeah. Um,
And me
further
trying to
along in
figure out how
that,
to read with a microphone in my
that's
way.
so in other words, he's saying release the technique is what Michael's saying,
Hmm.
and then he goes, the key is this: I never lose sight of my real agenda, which is to make music.
Hmm.
It's just like anything else, you have an agenda.
Yep.
Meditation is to clear your mind and focus. You know, sitting down and reading a book, you're going to set yourself up with a cup of coffee or tea, and you're going to sit down to make sure you can finish a couple of chapters in an hour or whatever, or however long it takes you to read them to understand them. Don't lose focus of what your agenda is. This happens to be music.
Hmm.
Um, and then this is where I think it's at the bottom of the page where he talks about skipping steps. So I don't know if you have anything before that.
Nope. You could go.
So he says, Michael talks in such a way about like skipping a few steps, and Victor goes, "It's okay to skip steps." He goes, "Won't I risk missing something?" And Michael says, "Skipping steps may not always be as thorough, but the better you learn to use your mind, the more knowledge you will bring with you, no matter how many steps are skipped. As long as you're always listening, you should have no problems." And I think that goes back
That's
to
my
what you're.
favorite part. You know,
Yeah,
as
you're
long as you're
always listening.
always listening, you should have no problems.
And I think that's a big thing about in general, like listening to people.
Hmm.
We get it. So I sometimes get excited in conversation, and I sometimes I'll kind of jump in, and it's not because I'm trying to cut the person off. It's just that there's a passion in the conversation, and I try to be really good about it. It's not because I'm trying to be like, whoa, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just like, oh yeah, no, I totally get it, and I want to jump in on it.
Hmm.
Um, so so I'm trying to be better about listening. You know, even today I was talking to my friend and she's like, you need to listen first. And I was like, and it was just because I was just excited or
Hmm.
interested or whatever. So it's a thing. But yeah, I think listening is a huge part.
Yep.
If I'm sitting down and I say to the person, go ahead, talk, and I put my mindset, I'm here to listen, I'm good about it because that's my mindset for that moment. But if I'm in a passionate or an engaged conversation, sometimes I forget to listen in that sense.
Yep.
Like the right social cues, right? Social
Cues.
cues, they're cues. Um, and then this follows after that. Whether you are talking about music or life, good technique is important. Understand that you must just learning technique is not enough. You must make a choice and a conscious choice to take one road or another, good or bad. Each is narrow, making it difficult for you to turn. And he continues to say, know that the mind is a powerful tool and that its power can respond to you both positively or negatively. Learning to use it completely should not be taken lightly. And so true.
Hmm.
I still think the yin and yang, even on the positively or negative, like understanding how your brain works in that sense
Yep.
is so important, and it's so hard
Absolutely.
to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's important.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
then I don't have any more after this.
No, that's it.
But I love the fact that he tells him to put out the fire in his head and put the fire out on the ground.
Yep.
Wow. And then this leads into the next chapter, which This is so interesting that they go from technique to emotion and feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's it. Like I said, I did not expect to take as much as I did out of that chapter because it was
Right.
technique, and then I read through it like multiple times. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, there's
Yep.
such good stuff in here.
Yeah, there is. Yep, for sure.
That was a lot to unpack. This whole book is a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is. Sure is.
So,
So,
uh, I don't have any more to say to this.
yep. I think we're done.
I think we're done. I think one of us needs to read the closing.
One of us can do that.
Yeah, I guess we can. We'll figure it out.
Yep.
I don't know.
So with that, just remember that our links to our social media will be in the show notes. Links to YouTube if you want to follow us on YouTube and see the video of this. Going forward, as long as this is successful, we will continue to upload videos of the podcast as well, so you can watch and or listen. Live stream every Sunday evening at 7:30. We'll be doing some Victor Wooten music, some Victor Wooten talks and interviews, and
you go live on Fridays.
I was gonna get to the Fridays.
Yeah, but you're Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Like there's a day order.
Sunday's the beginning of the week.
Yes, but this comes out on a Tuesday, so your next day would be the Friday.
Whatever. Friday evenings at 8 o'clock. I do a live show. CJ sometimes joins me when he has time, and yeah, we listen to full albums for the most part on Friday evenings, and different stuff. Sometimes it's yin and yang stuff. Like we've done like Sarah Bareilles and Dream Theater, on a Friday evening. So, um, trying to keep it interesting and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, make
So
sure you
yeah,
check out our links. Follow us
thank
on
you for
Twitch. Follow us on
listening
YouTube.
to these. Yeah, follow us on YouTube. Thank you for listening to this podcast and joining us through this journey of the music lesson. And I look forward to going through these chapters and jumping into the second book too.
Yep, me too.
Yeah. So, are you reading the closing? Who read it the last one? I
Potentially,
forget.
you did.
I did.
Yeah, you did the first three.
I did the first three.
Yeah.
I can't remember that I did them. Oh, it's been a few weeks.
Yep.
All right.
All right. So we'll see you all either Friday or Sunday, or just the next episode.
Or just hit us up.
Yeah.
Chat with us in Discord, email
Absolutely.
us, whatever.
Yep.
Throw down a comment. We're ready to go.
Yep. Let's do it.
Great.
And we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
See ya.